Did you know that your beliefs about money are basically created before the age of 7? And unless you learn to do something about that and to rewrite those beliefs, that you'll be stuck with the things that you believed about money when you were that age? This is why today we're going to be diving into how your childhood has influenced your finances, your capacity to make more, and your ability to build wealth. We're going to be diving into how this relates to your family of origin, plus your generational line that goes back hundreds of years, much, much further than you think, much further than perhaps you've ever realized. I'll also be revealing the 3 core money patterns that you may have inherited from your family and how to begin rewiring these money patterns, these beliefs, and these perspectives and these stories so that you are free to write your own path, your own map to wealth. And you're no longer held back by the stories and narratives from the past and what you've watched around you growing up. So, I want you to, for just a moment, think about your earliest memory with money. For me, I'm going to share a little story. My earliest memory with money was going to my dad when I was about 4 years old and asking for $2 to go to the YMCA with a neighbor. I just wanted to go to the YMCA and go swimming that day and da-da-da. And I remember my dad telling me he didn't have any money. He didn't have any money to give me. Sorry. And I remember, I can still feel it, the physical experience of guilt and shame for asking for money from my dad. I felt so bad that I asked him for money and that he didn't have it, that I think it was a very long time before I asked for money again. And think about it. Think about what a child of 4 believes and takes into her body, into her soul, into her being, into her relationship with money based upon that experience. Well, I took a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. I didn't want to ask anybody for help. I didn't want to ask people for money. I felt like it was a bad thing to ask people for money. I felt like that's something you shouldn't do, that it made other people feel bad, and all of this stuff. Guess how that would have impacted my business had I not addressed it? It would have made it very, very challenging to ask anyone for money, to ask for the sale, to do marketing, to show up, to talk about money in general. It would have made it very, very hard in my personal relationships to receive money, to receive gifts, to receive compliments, to receive anything from other people, because I would always feel guilty for receiving things because I felt like it was things that people didn't have to give me to begin with. I would also feel really, really bad asking for help in any area of my life, which would then send me into that fight or flight response, that stress response that makes me hyper independent, makes me feel like I have to fight for my survival and go it alone instead of being able to relax and depend on other people, and to depend on money, and to depend on things. So this is why these simple memories, these simple experiences can have such profound effects on our finances, on our money mindset, on our relationship with money, on the stories that we tell ourselves about the way money works in the world. Because this is what's going on from a psychological level. Like I have my PhD in psychology. I know all about, learning and behavior and all of this stuff from all of my education, plus my 20 years of work with clients. And I can tell you that we have basically formatted our hard drive, to make myself sound all old, to whatever it was that we were experiencing before the age of 7. Whatever it was that we were experiencing before the age of 7, whether this is regarding money, whether this is regarding success, whether this is regarding relationships, whatever it is, basically creates a template by which we base everything else on that template. We create an expectation that this is the way that the world works. This is the way that people function, that money functions, that success functions, that work functions, that, exercise functions, anything based upon our experiences when we are that young. The reason this happens is, how the heck do you think that we learn to do things, right? When we're babies, we're born with no knowledge of anything yet, really. A lot of, we don't have the thoughts that go, oh, this is the way the world works. We have to learn the way the world works. And we learn at that age through osmosis. We're like little sponges. We take everything in around us. We watch what other people do. We listen to the people's tones of voices, whether they're stressed when they're talking about things, whether they're not. We hear the words they say. We hear the beliefs that they have. Things like money doesn't grow on trees and all of these kinds of limiting beliefs people might have in our family around money. And we take those things in as the quote unquote truth of the way that it all works. Think about it this way, and this is a bit of a weird analogy, but every single person that I work with, and I'm an expert in trauma, says to me, I always just thought my family was normal. I always just thought that the way I was treated was normal. I just thought that this is the way that things were, that this is the way that things are. And the reason this is because that's your template for the world that you experienced prior to age 7. And so it becomes your expectation that this is what's normal. And so when it's, abuse or trauma or things like that, that's incredibly, challenging to acknowledge. But it also exists for things like money, things like success, things like our relationship to quote unquote hard work, and for things to have to be, difficult or, that we have to suffer or sacrifice in order to have what we want. All of these things come from these expectations that this is the way that the world works. Those expectations serve almost like glasses or sunglasses. They're a lens through which we look at the world. Luckily, we can do something about it. We can change those glasses. We can take the freaking glasses off. And I'll be talking about that later, about how we can begin to rewrite this and how we begin to shift these stories and narratives. But the idea here that I really want you to take in is that your family, particularly your family of origin, the one you watched doing stuff when you were an itty bitty kid, has a profound influence on who you are and what you choose and what you believe about yourself and your value and everything today until you actually acknowledge it, become aware of it, and address it. So all of these things become this template. They become this springboard. They become these lenses through which we see the world. And they plant subconscious seeds in our brain that we're not even aware of that are influencing us. Because it's not like we're sitting there going, oh, I'm thinking about this experience when I was 4 years old and I felt, ashamed that I asked my dad for $2 and he didn't have it. I forgot about that memory until I did, work on my money story and work on the, childhood experiences I had that set up a template of shame and guilt around asking for money. And so it's not that these things are conscious. It's not that we're thinking about them. That's actually not the way these little micro traumas work, because that's essentially what that was. These actually are just little subconscious developmental seeds that we have planted in the back of our mind that are growing a garden that we're not even aware of that's influencing us in the here and now. And so, excuse me, this is why it's so important to become aware of these patterns and to become aware of how these things have carried into our present day life, into our present day behaviors, choices, habits, etc., based upon beliefs and expectations and a template and a map of the world and of how money works that isn't even ours. That's something that we adopted from somebody else that we probably haven't even critically thought about and haven't even examined and may not even be aware of anymore. Now, furthermore, these experiences aren't just about your childhood. They're about your relationship with your family in general, not just your nuclear family, the one that, you saw like cooking dinner and eating together or whatever growing up, but also generations back, generation after generation after generation. We are influenced by what our family has experienced through time. That is coming into your being and into the present moment here and now. Now, this occurs on both the psychological and biological and, frankly, spiritual level. On a biological level, basically, there's epigenetic research on basically we inherit trauma responses. We inherit the impact of traumas that our family generations back have experienced. There's, little caps on the end of our DNA called telomeres that are influenced by the trauma, not of ourselves, but of our parents and our parents' parents and our parents' parents' parents. I mean, think about it for a moment. You were once an egg inside of your mother. So you were a cell inside of her body when she was experiencing certain stressors and traumas and things in her life. Well, guess what? She was an egg inside of your grandmother's body. And so whatever your grandmother was experiencing on a physiological, biological level was experienced by the egg that turned into your mom. And that egg had the spark of what you are, which turned into you. And so on a biological level, these things go back generations. They also go back on a psychological level. We inherit these beliefs on a generational, you know what I mean, like through time ancestral level about the way the world works, not just by watching before the age of 7, but by cultural narratives that we adopt or learning from the experiences and stories that our family share with us. So an example is my client, Sarah, whose grandmother was in the Depression, right? And her experiences in the Depression, which were told to Sarah her whole life, oh, Nana's sharing the story about the Depression again, led to Sarah feeling as though money wasn't safe. She went into doing a lot of compulsive saving, coupon cutting, fearing, that money would abandon her, a lot of scarcity beliefs, fear of using things up, wouldn't use the good china, all of that kind of stuff, because of this Depression era belief that her grandmother had because of a real experience, but passed on through storytelling to Sarah. And then Sarah internalized and made it a story that she lived by until she dismantled it in my program, Empowering Wealth. So this is why it's so important to understand that these narratives, these stories, these beliefs that we have about money don't only just come from our childhood, they come from our ancestors. They come through time. They're like a wave that keeps, or like a wind that keeps influencing us and keeps blowing our hair. And we're wondering like, what? I look so fabulous like I'm in a hair commercial. No, I'm kidding. But, we wonder why things are the way they are in the here and now. And a lot of it is because of these early influences that we had with our families. Now, I want to talk for a moment about a few other things before we dig into how to begin rewiring this pattern and what to do about it. The first of which is there are 3 core money patterns that you may have that you've inherited from your family. The first pattern is the money equals love pattern. This is basically the pattern that says, money equals feeling loved. This comes from feeling conditional love when you were growing up. Conditional love is basically the idea that you have to earn love. It's not something that you just get because in virtue of being yourself and in just you're deserving. It's that you have to do something to get it, right? So this ends up relating to a lot of feeling that you always have to give. Fear of charging too much, fear of taking from other people, undercharging, having poor boundaries in your business or around money. It might be things like being a person who can't say no to lending money to other people. And it can really strongly impact your relationships and your business, obviously, because if you always feel the need to overgive, you're always going to feel deplenished. You're never going to feel nourished and nurtured. You're never going to feel like it's your turn. You're always going to be basically going back to those sacrifice scripts that says, I have to sacrifice something in order to get what I want. I have to give something up because I can't just be deserving inherently because of who I am. The second core money pattern that I want you guys to be aware of is the security pattern. This is somebody who essentially experienced probably a lot of scarcity or perhaps a sudden loss, like the loss of a parent or a bankruptcy in their family or the loss of a home or things like that growing up. And it's caused them to basically hold on to security around money any way they can, every day they can. It's a pure scarcity mindset. It is the fear that money's going to abandon you, that money's going to run away, that you won't have money tomorrow. So this can result in things like extreme saving, hoarding, difficulty spending money on essentials, Scarcity behaviors like a fear of using things up, or like I said, hoarding. You know what I mean? People who save like everything because they think they may use it at some point or another. Fear of using the nice things because because you have to save it for a rainy day. Difficulty with risk taking, calculated risk taking, like in your business, and this can be, like I said, a result of feeling like you've had these sudden losses in your life, like a loss of a home or a loss of a parent, or extreme scarcity, like growing up poor and feeling as though things were very difficult to come by. And this can obviously have an extreme impact on your feelings of satisfaction with what you have, because there's never enough. When you come from security, you never feel secure enough. You always feel like you have to feel more secure. You have to have, more in the savings. You have to have more things stocked up. You have to have, oh, that's a good one. A scarcity one is when you stock up your cupboards because you fear that, like, what happens if I run out of food, right? That can often go back to these kinds of beliefs as well. And it ends up kicking up a lot of stress and causing a high degree of stress in folks that ends up basically screwing with their relationship with money as well. Now, the third core money pattern that I want you to be aware of is this idea that money equals power. So this is things like if you grew up seeing money used as a way to control people. So perhaps, let's say you had, mom and dad. Dad is the big earner and basically gave mom an allowance and wouldn't allow her to spend money. Or whenever mom bought anything, she would hide it in the car and wouldn't let dad see the purchases because she was afraid of his reaction, because he wanted to control the money and he didn't like when she would spend, things like that. It can also be due to things like narcissism in the family growing up. Money used as a way to motivate people, money used as a thing to dangle over people's head as a means of reward, as a means of acknowledging accomplishment. And that can also go back to the money equals love thing that we talked about a little bit ago. It can also relate to feeling as though people who have money tend to misuse and abuse power, particularly if you observed anyone in your life who had money, was powerful, and was a real asshole. Like, you're going to feel as though money, power, and being an asshole are intimately linked. And who wants to be an asshole? Nobody. It's not like who wants to be a millionaire, nobody. And so then you hold yourself back subconsciously from making more money or having more power because you associate it with being a total jerk. And so this ends up resulting in a lot of stagnation because, power, empowerment. Think about it. Power is empowerment. Power isn't necessarily this misused, abused thing. That's just the way some people do it. Power is standing in your leadership. It's being the CEO in your company. It's being the person who's confident. It's being the person who can trust themselves. Those are powerful stances. And so if you have a feeling of fear of power, fear of how power and money relate, or fear that you have to control everything, alternatively, in terms of fear, control, it actually, totally stymies totally your growth, your income growth, your business growth, even your relationship growth, because everything feels as though it's a power play. And so things feel like they're a challenge to you if they're not working out the way that you want them to, or you feel as though you have to over control everything and you won't delegate anything in your business and you won't let anything go, or you feel as though you're really out of control all of the time unless everybody's approving of you, because that's the way power was wielded in your family. Now, one other thing I just want to briefly touch on, but it's really, the outside of the scope of this, of what we're talking about today, and I want to do a whole episode on it, is attachment styles in money. There's really 4 key attachment styles. There's anxious attachment. Anxious attachment, folks, in terms of money, will result a lot of times in overspending to maintain relationships because you're anxious to hold on to relationships. Fear of financial abandonment. You fear that people are going to leave you, right? Avoidant attachment is the second one. Avoidant attachment is this idea that, you're basically disconnected from everything and everyone to a certain degree as a means of protection from yourself, from an inconsistent childhood, from inconsistent relationships with your parents. Again, I'm going to go into this at a later date, but this can result in extreme financial independence, feeling like you have to go it alone, feeling like you can't depend on anybody, feeling like you can't even trust money to have your back, and having difficulty combining finances and relationships, all kinds of things. The third one is disorganized. Disorganized is essentially kind of a mix between the anxious and avoidant. So it's like you overspend to maintain relationships, and then you get angry and upset about overspending. And so then you refuse to spend any money on those relationships and get super independent and pull back. And it's this push and pull and this, like yo-yo effect from one extreme to the other. And then the fourth one is secure attachment. Secure attachment is basically when, we had a good relationship with our parents and good relationship with our parents and money. And so this is this balanced approach to money and feeling as though you have healthy financial boundaries and you can have great communication around money and all of that. Now, as promised, I want to dive in briefly to talk about how we start rewiring these money stories, how we start rewiring and rewriting and redefining our relationship with money in a way that isn't like basically stuck in a box of what we've experienced up until now or we experienced as a child. The first step, the most boring step, but the step that's absolutely freaking necessary each and every time is we have to become aware. We first and foremost always have to become aware. These are not mine. Understanding and looking at and really seeing our money patterns, our money blocks, these beliefs that we have around money, understanding our money story and how these relate to our childhood, to our parents, to the generational trauma that has been experienced down our family line, and understanding and really becoming aware of our knee-jerk money behaviors and habits. Because here's the thing, we all think these things a lot of times are just automatic, but they're not. When we become aware of these reactions, these responses, these habits, these ways of operating in the world, what happens is we become more and more empowered to choose something different. We become more and more empowered to shift that narrative. And so a couple of ways that you can begin to do this just very quickly are things like journaling about your earliest memory, writing down all earliest memories around money, writing down all of the memories that you can think of around money, identifying which patterns you're living out in the here and now that are sabotaging your relationship with money and seeing if you can think of how that relates back to your family. Understanding the limiting beliefs, the money blocks that your family, that your mom, that your dad, that your grandma and grandpa and all of this stuff have been passing down to you. Noticing your triggers and utilizing those as a portal of understanding what it is you've got going on from the past that's still influencing you today. Because the truth about triggers is basically it's either a thread that goes back to an old trauma or it's something that you believe. And so if it's one or the other of those things and you're getting triggered, then it's time to examine what's going on with that trigger and seeing where you're coming from, like when you're acting from these old stories and seeing when you're doing things that are motivated by these old fears and anxiety, money anxiety and income anxiety that you've inherited from your family, and then beginning to flip the script to really challenge those old beliefs and to really, you can actually rewrite old memories through, different processes which are amazing, which we do at Empowering Wealth. You can create new money rituals, which support new behaviors, habits, and choices with money in the here and now. You can use conscious spending practices so that you make choices from a place of awareness instead of from that subconsciously unconscious place where you're just doing the old thing because it's simple and easy to be inside your comfort zone. And the other thing is really learning healthy boundaries when it comes to money and really feeling as though you can have healthy communication with people around you when it comes to money. So the deeper practices that you can do are things like the subconscious work that we've been talking about a little bit. It's nervous system regulation practices. So getting really relaxed with money so that you're not operating from these old anxieties and worries that aren't yours once again. Visualizations, meditations, working with a coach or a therapist on these deeper money templates that again, you can reset and you can change. at any time, and surrounding yourself with a community of people who are instilling in you new money beliefs, new ways of viewing money, instead of only surrounding yourself with people who are reinforcing those old ones. So hopefully you've gotten some ahas today. I'd love to hear from you about how you feel your childhood has impacted your beliefs, your stories, and your relationship with money and building wealth.